Welcome to Watercolor Studio 42, and today I'm going to be doing, probably finishing up a little bit of some of my fall scenes, some of my pictures. This seems to be one of those, I don't know where they make, it looks like a shack of sort, and it looks like something that they might use for storage, maybe something like that on the farm. Sometimes they have some of these maple shacks too, where they kind of boil the maple syrup that they take from the trees, but I'm not quite sure that would be exactly that. It looks more like a farm tool storage area. It doesn't look like it would house probably any animals, you know, like goats or horses or cows or whatever. But it's a little old building here, and it sits down kind of out in the field, the meadow. And we got some trees coming in. There's a branch that goes up across here, and then coming in from this side, you're going to see a cluster of leaves in this area. And then, of course, the ground line. The ground line can be a little bit bumpy. It can kind of go down. It sort of goes down, slopes a little bit downhill. And so we could kind of put that in a little bit that way. And then over in this area here, you could do a variety of things. You could put some water in there. You could have some water going by or whatever you'd like. It could be a road or a street. Or you could just leave it. Basically, it's just some trees. Have some trees coming into the picture, something like this. Okay? So now, I've said this before, I'll say it again. A lot of times when I start off, I don't spend an awful lot of time with the sketching. It depends on whatever the subject might be. You might have to slow down a little bit if you're trying to do a house portrait. So you want to make the place look, you know, like what it should be, you know, the person's home. And so you have to make everything sort of proper, you know, put the doors in the right place, the windows in the right place, how many windows, etc., and whether it has a porch or a deck or something that's relevant to that particular thing. But when you're doing it, when you're winging something that's just a farm scene or whatever, you can do a lot of things. You can leave in a lot, or you can take out a few things. There is, in this particular picture that I have, which doesn't show up very well, it won't show up too well on TV, I don't think, but there is a door over here. We'll put a little bit of a rectangular shape in there. There is a door. There's another window in this particular, on this side, the addition to the building. And then there's something else, maybe, I don't know, there's something else over here. It's hard to make it out, but we'll just say maybe it's something like that. And there is a couple more windows down in this area, maybe if you want to add to it. Whatever you want the roof to be, shingled, or sometimes they have just tar paper on the roof, and sometimes it's very elaborate. It could be metal, you know, like tin roofs and so forth, that they put on barns and things. Now the background, we've got some trees over here. I like to keep it open a little bit in this area. Whether if you want to have some hills off the distance, you could do that. That kind of adds a little bit to it, and it helps fill in that particular space around here. Here we go, something like that. Some more trees. Right this particular time of year, most all the leaves have disappeared by now. And so I have to start thinking about doing something more like a winter scene. We're into December, so we're getting pretty close to winter. What is 21st of December? Winter, right? Comes along, right? So that's what we're going to be doing. Some pictures in that respect. Now, that looks about it as far as the amount of drawing or sketching I have to do. I used a pen today. It might be a little bit darker than using a pencil. The pen, it's enough for me to see, but probably it's hard to pick out the sketch on television. So when I start off a picture, especially an outdoor picture, I always start from the top, do the sky area, and then do the bottom. And then what I do finish up with is the building itself, which is the subject of the picture, really, and then sign it, I guess, finish up. So anyways, so I'm going to start off, and I'm just going to wet a little bit up into this area. Make sure my brush doesn't have too much paint in it left over. Here we go. We just put some water across here. They call that a wash. Put a wash on in the sky area. Just recently I was out in the western part of the state, and probably the leaves and things are a little bit starting to go by, you know, the color and so forth. You know how the leaves dry out and they don't have too much color left in them, chlorophyll or whatever it might be. I'm just going to wet this down in here, get some moisture down in this area. A lot of times when you wet the paper, you know, what you're doing, you're relaxing the fiber of the paper so that the paint and the water and so forth absorbs more into the paper, softer, if you will, into the paper. That's why we put a little bit of water on first. Okay, now, if I'm going to have a little bit of blue showing through, I'm going to take a little bit of speck of blue here. I hope that's no, that's the green. I'm sorry. Let's jump up here. All my colors look the same when you look at them. There you go. There's some blue. That's some blue. Now, I've already wet the paper, so see, it's very easy to spread the blue paint around. You don't have to put too much paint on the paper. And if you want it to get a little bit lighter before it settles in too much, I just take it and wet it down and pull some of the color out. You can take some of the color out of the paper. If you want it to be an overcast day, that's fine. You could start with a little bit more gray than blue. But this particular picture, you don't see much sky there. You just see a couple of patches of blue here and there. In this particular picture that I'm working from, this photograph from a magazine. Magazines that I have, country. Well, that's the title of one of the magazines. It's a country magazine to begin with, and then I do get the American art journals. They're very expensive, though. I'm careful with them. I don't want to throw them away or damage them too much. I don't cut any pictures out of those magazines. Some of the other magazines I do a little bit more with. Okay, we got the sky in there. And let's come across the bottom with some of that green that I had here. Just across the bottom. Just to add some color. Get some color on the paper. I'll put a little dab of yellow in that. I always like the yellow to kind of come through, especially when the sunlight is hitting the paper just right. You can pick up some of that sunlight. A little bit off in there. Okay, then you can take some of that, take some of your green and kind of blend it in and kind of wiggle it around on your paper. Okay. Now this is getting a lot of color on the paper all at once. You notice I'm starting off with a big brush too. I always, well, I can't say always, but for the most part, if I'm doing a landscape or seascape or something, I usually start with a big brush. And spread that paint around. Let's put some more out in there. Blend it in with some of that yellow that I put on the paper. There you go. So what you're doing here is getting a lot of color out there in a hurry. And I'm going to blot a little bit up in here, get that sky to dry a little bit over on both sides. Something like that. And we'll go right to the edge. Sometimes I put a false matte on the paper by putting tape on the inside. So I didn't do that today. I didn't put the tape on, which normally I don't. I don't put the tape around it because I actually use a cut mat to begin with. You know, I don't go with the false mats. The only reason I have a false mat is it's quicker and faster to show you what it might look like if it had a white mat around it. And that's the reason I do it for the TV program. But normally I actually cut a mat. You can use a double mat type of idea. Use a little margin of color on the white. That's sort of like a border type of thing. You just blend some of this color into the background. Now we've got, well, let's hit it with some of this orange first. I hope the blue is dry enough, because if I start putting yellow down into a wet blue, you know I'm going to get a lot of green coming back. Oh, here you go. You got mostly yellow. Some yellow in here. A little bit of repeated up in there. Maybe some over into this area. Now, for the most part, I'll stick with the big brush as long as I can. And I know I have a whole mess of brushes, all different sizes, or a lot of them mostly the same size. And I have all these brushes around, but I don't use that many. I don't bring that many with me if I'm just painting by myself. I have enough brushes so I could, provide brushes for all of my students in class if they so needed brushes and other material too. Always bring something. Have something with you, in case somebody forgot to bring this or that, whatever. Okay. Like I forgot my apron today, that's why I'm... just a little bit different, I guess. Okay, you can see what I'm doing. That's a bright spot up in there of the yellow. Now, while I'm at it, let's just start working some of the orange in. And again, that can be tapped in, get some texture. Get some texture in there. And put that in into the yellow color, or cover it to some extent. Okay. Now, a lot of times you could slow down a bit. I keep going right along, and usually the subjects that I pick are not too overly complicated, so that I don't have to slow down to get too fussy with them, you know, as a rule. Because we only have a short program, we only have about an hour. And we try to get most everything done within that time. A lot of times we don't. And I have to apologize for that. Oops, ran out of time. Okay, but you can see what I'm doing here. Adding some color. I like to keep it open. I probably mentioned it just briefly. I keep sometimes a part of the roof of a building open to the sky, or to maybe some background. I don't like to have like the woods and so forth sort of act like too much of an umbrella over everything. So I like to see some of the sky coming through here and there. There's a water stain for me. I'm just going to leave that up there. It is a watercolor painting, right? So why not leave in some of the water stains? You can always take it out if it's too distracting. I can take some of that out, just wash it out. That's the beauty of watercolor, you know. When you start off painting, a lot of times, if you don't like what you're doing, you just blot it and wipe it out and so forth. You can lighten it up, but then if you have to, you can resort to using some white acrylic and just go over that, and it acts like a whiteout. You can white out the area and then paint on top of that, again with the color that you wanted to use, or just leave it sort of open. Okay, now see, I'm going to jump down here. We'll put some of this orange. It probably there'll be some leaves on the ground anyway, so we can have a little bit of that. It's kind of sprinkled into the green. Maybe some leaf texture. Something, you know, sort of dab around a little bit. So far we've got some of this background texture in. Now I'm going to just put a little bit of, I get this raw sienna here, and I've also got a darker brown that I use quite often, and that's that sepia. So between the two, we can get some more texture into this, a little bit, but more contrast between the two colors. Just dab around. We know there's going to be some undershadow, you know, always under leaves and things on the trees and the plants on the ground. There's always that shadow that's always underneath. Even on buildings, you know, the vertical building will have some shadows around the base of the wall of the building. So I'm still hanging on to the big brush here and kind of tapping around a little bit. Go a little bit darker in places. But that's all I'm doing, really, just tapping some of that color around here and there. Okay, let's see. I guess I could bring that down a little bit lower. don't get too much into the roof there if I can avoid it. Okay, I'm just going to outline this and push it back up. The roof is going to be sort of a grayish blue. I'm not quite sure if it's going to be a metal roof or whatever it may tend to come out looking like. We'll see as we go along. Let's put some paint right across here. Kind of outline the roof a little bit. Yeah. All right. And let's work something right on the edge of the wall of the building. And I guess the rest is just going to be just darker shades of different color. Okay. Now, if I want, I can go to this sepia. This is really quite a bit of a darker color, really dark compared to what I've been doing. And there are some darker corners, usually along the side, that you can put in. I must remind you that most paintings, just about all the paintings that you ever look at, they always have somewhere that color, same color has been repeated somewhere to kind of harmonize everything that you get on the paper here. I'm going to kind of move this in a little bit more. If it gets too wet sometimes, I just pinch the brush out and use the brush like a sponge. You can kind of pick up some of that moisture and kind of push it around a little bit. Around the side of the building. It's going to be darker through here too. A little bit darker. You just add some of that now while I'm thinking about it. We can put some of that in. Very dark in this area here. Right along that edge, right up in this area. Could be part of a tree or something. You ever want to put a tree in, you could just take the edge of your brush and just pull it down there and lift some of that paint out. See how it exposes some of the paper. It looks like the trunk of a tree there. If you want that to show up that way. Okay, something like that. So this is sort of like kind of setting it up, building the background, building the scenery. You have to have the scenery for a play or a show or something. The background scenery. Well, this is even though it's down here, it's all part of the part of the stage we have here set. Here we go. Okay, I can put, like later on, I can put some other trunk trees coming into that. Let's pull this back a little bit more. Take it right out to the edge. I took the tree out, by the way. You want to put it back in, we just lift some of the paint, put some of that back in. Yeah. You want to put another tree off there, just take some of that paint out while it's still wet. It suggests another tree in there. You could have something that's eventually coming into here. Okay, let's go tap a little bit more. See what we got here. All right, now what we have to do is decide, in a way, I guess, what color you want the building to be. And in this picture, it looks like sort of a red washed paint that they put on it. But of course it peels and fades and so forth, so you don't have to be too fussy with how well you paint the barn, I guess. Let's put a little bit of red out over here. I use this gamboge. It's kind of, well, actually it's alizarin crimson, really, but they give it another title sometimes. Not gamboge, what am I thinking of? Gamboge is yellow. Quinacridone rose, that's it. That's what we're dealing with here. We're gonna paint, we'll get some pink in there for a starter. Go right along the edge of the roof there. We can get some more paint on the brush. We're just right along through here. Like that. And of course the siding is, it's a board filled in with boards. It's vertical. So I guess I could paint the side of the wall in vertically. I could use a different size brush eventually too while I'm doing this. Let's get a little bit more right up along the edge of the roof here. Yeah, just pull it back down. Get right up in that corner. There you go. And just pull it right down to the ground line. Just get it right in there. Okay. Now, you can leave a little bit of white coming through. That's the characteristic of watercolor painting, to allow some of that lighter color of the paper to show through. That's very, very common with watercolor. Highlighted, whatever they call it, can be called highlight, reflection or something like that. Okay. Get that right down there. Now, I'm going to do the same thing on the other building, the attached building to this. Again, go right along the edge of the roof here. Now, sometimes buildings get old and the roof starts to kind of buckle in a little bit. So if sometimes your pictures of barns and things aren't exactly up straight, if you will, maybe it's because they're starting to buckle, from their age. Everything sort of settles down and eventually falls down, if you will. Let's go right down to the bottom of go right down to the ground here. We can always do something else across there. Now, if you want, you can come back. You get a little some darker paint on your brush. You can start making some marks in the wall there too. Add some texture to that. I keep myself personally. I keep giving it another layer of paint, and sometimes with this this particular color, you can take and put a little bit of your Payne's gray in it and make it look a lot darker. See, I think I have some Payne's gray. No, that's the green. Where did I put that? Up here, maybe? Well, anyways, we'll get to that later on. That's pretty dark, isn't it? Let's do a lot along the bottom edge here. We just start getting some texture in here. Now you can sort of jump around with the picture. I mean, you don't. I don't particularly paint one spot. I don't finish it in one area. I just keep moving around, jumping around. Sometimes you have to make sure the paint's dry enough before you do anything else with it. I can put some shadow in this. It's in the picture. So I can put some shadow in there. Pull that right to the edge of the paper. See, you're giving the ground, you're putting some texture into the ground now. You get that base color there, but you build up on top of it. And that's what I do a lot of when I paint. I kind of put different layers of color in until I get to a particular point. And I'll say, okay, I guess I've done enough of that. Let's do something down the side here. Make that a little bit more of a contrast in there. Right on the side of that barn. And that can come down right this way too. Right on that edge. And just pull the paint out. Just pull it right out of there. Right to the edge. Okay. I've got a real wicked stain going in there. Now what happens when you paint with the paper flat, like it's flat on the table, that's what happens, the water just settles right in. It doesn't run anywhere. Sometimes you can put a board, put paper on the board and tilt it. Put a block of wood or something underneath so that it gravitates down. Otherwise, it just spreads out and just settles into the paper. So sometimes you just have to pull it around. Like I'm doing, just pull some of that wet around and distribute it somewhere else. There you go. Sometimes you don't want that water. You don't want that water stain to stay there. So you have to do something a little bit different with it. Okay. And one thing I'm running out of, sometimes I use like a natural sponge at home, and I'll stipple into this, especially where there's a lot of texture, where the leaves are and all that. Excuse me. Where the leaves are, and I'll texture into it, and it gives it a little bit more of a leafy texture rather than a too flat a color. Okay, I've got that in there. There's some crazy things happening up in this area here. Sometimes I just soften those out. Spread it around. Okay. Now, in this particular photograph, there's a lot of green in the foreground, and there's a lot of green up and through this area here. So we could take some of that green that we have over here, and we could kind of push some of that up into a little further up into the picture. Something like that. Now, where I don't have that tape around the edges, today I can just take the paint right out to the edge of the paper. Just pull it right off the paper. You have some of that blue kind of spread around there a little bit. Okay, now let's see what. I don't want to stop with that green there. We got to go take some of that, pull that around, and bring some of that over here, if we can. Get some more moisture on the brush here. Take some of this, pull it right around, off over into here, and just tap a little bit, spread it around. Okay, so now we got the building pretty well surrounded here with color, and so now it's just a matter of letting some of this dry. And what I'll keep doing is keep building the color up until I get it to a point where, okay, this is dark enough, I can stop now and let that go. I've got a light area out here too, and it's not in the picture. It's on the roof of this shed here, but not up in that area. Isn't that funny how I left that spot? Okay, let's put some green back over into that. Okay, get some color back up into here. Not so much over there. Maybe a little bit more down in this corner. Distribution of the color. And what you're doing is just pulling it together. Pulling it together. Hopefully it will kind of pull together for you. Let's do something else up in here. Break this up. A lot of leaves up in this area. Okay. Pull some of that out. Get a little bit more into here. Now you can work on the sky, and you can work on the ground too, while you're letting the barn dry, so to speak. Yeah, here we go. I'm leaving some of that open, more so than you see maybe in the picture. Let some of the sky come through here. A little bit up in there too. You don't notice it because the sky is sort of a real softer. Actually, in this picture, it almost looks like it's more grayish, you know, like an overcast sky. Okay, we'll put a little bit more orange up in there. Get some of the orange back in the corner here. A little bit more. See, 1, 2, 3 places. That's one thing I don't do. I mentioned it before. I don't finish any particular area. I just bounce around a little bit. And when an area seems to be dry enough to put something else on top of it, another color, whatever it might be. Let's put some more of that orange down there, a little patch of that in there. 1, 2, 3, right? There you go. Sometimes you wonder, how come the artist or whoever, they got this painting to work for them? Well, it's just a matter of just distributing the color so your eye can bounce around and move to different areas. But however, the main focus eventually has to be probably the barn, and not so much the background. It's just like this stage, you know, you've got the scenery on the stage, but the performers, the actors and all that, that's what takes takes your attention. It shouldn't be totally just focused on the surroundings, you know. So away we go. I don't copy. I see things there, but not necessarily do I put it into the picture. If I like something, I'll put it back in there. Like I might like something that might be happening up in here, okay? I take a little bit of that darker brown. See how I can put that back in there? See, get something going there. Now that's a little bit too dark, so what I do with that, I just pull it out a little bit, kind of pull it out, move it around, but make it look like there's something going on back in here. Maybe it could be just a pile of whatever, pile of wood, I guess. Get something going. Just a darker area. See what else we can do. Pull this across maybe. It's dark, actually it's darker up in this corner too. Right around in there, a little bit, it gets a little bit dark. That probably might not be exactly the color I have in mind, but we'll leave that and maybe put another little glaze or something on top of that as we go along. Now, again, I'm waiting for this to set up a little bit more. I'm going to blot that, get that to lighten up a bit. Now, if I want to go back and do the roof, I talked a little bit about using some of that Payne's Gray, and it has a little bit of blue in it. So let's see if I can put some of that texture on the roof. That's a little bit dark right now, so let's quiet that down. Pull that around. Take some of that right out of there in a hurry. Now this side over here looks like it's getting more light on it, so I don't want to get this too dark off here on this particular roof. Just take some of the paint out of here, put a little bit over here. Something like this. Okay, and I'll leave this unattended. Let's get this kind of filled in across here. Something like that. Pull some of that out of there. Okay, this roof tends to be a little bit lighter. Probably the sunlight's getting to it a little bit more. You can leave that a little bit lighter. What I do is take and just pull some of the paint out of it. Yeah. See how that looks lighter? Maybe. Maybe. I'm not sure. Sometimes. Yeah, let's see what we can do. Okay. Remember to go a little bit darker up into here. Oops. Got some blue on there. That's all right. We can pull some of that across, pull some of that out of there. Yeah, get a little bit of a little variation of color there. Go across over to here. I need a little bit of contrast between the roof here. See what I can do. I don't know. I just want this one to be a little bit darker. Bring that up, pull that across. Might have to use a smaller brush. Yeah, okay. Get that out of the corner there. And just take a whole batch of this, pull it right across over here, and then pull it down. Get some of that roof texture in there. Okay, go up into the corner here. See if I can pull some of that out of there. Not bad. You see now that's lighter here. That's fine. That's okay. There might be a couple of little shadows in there, but not much. Okay. Now over in here, this gets a lot darker. Right through here. That's darker. See if we can get some of this color pulled out. I'm not too overly concerned about how even that edge is, because I'm going to make that, outline that a little darker anyways before we get through. And put some of this in. Okay, we're getting close to the particular color, the texture. Trying to make it look like a more a metal roof rather than a... Okay, so we have something like this working for us. Now, as you go along, you let this dry, and then you come back in. I'm going to have to give my 1-inch flat brush a little bit of rest here, and I'm going to pick up something else. It's maybe a smaller. Yeah, here's a small 1.5 inch flat, and I'm just going to start doing some of the more of the contrast in here. If it's dry enough. Now that's the big thing about watercolor. You have to make sure that your colors are dry, otherwise they're going to bleed and you're going to have a big problem. We'll go down a little bit to the corner of the building like this. And I'm just going to kind of wiggle this back, give it a little texture right there. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to come along, right along under the eave of the roof here, like this. Get it somewhat straight. Doesn't matter if it's a little bit bumpy. In reality, it is quite a bit bumpy. And again, I'm just going to take some of that and just kind of pull some of that down. And that could be some of the siding, the panel that's on the building. I want some of that pink to show through, though. I don't want to get this too dark. I want to let some of that color come through. Now, I'm going to use a different brush. See if I can use a round brush, and maybe I can get this smoother. I don't know. I want this to kind of just come down straight, pull this down, right into the ground area. Take some of that, pull that out of there. Take some of that edge off. And pull that right down straight. Now I didn't go all the way out to the edge here, so probably I should have. Maybe I take some color out of there and bring it back up to here. and then pull that down. Yeah. We're getting some of that. The siding on the building is very rough. It's just some sheets vertically, some of the planks of wood there. Okay, we're going to go, let's take some of this out of here, and we're going to go right across over here under this one. And give that some shading. This can be lighter. You can let some more red come through that one. Take some of this edge off here. Bring some of that over to here. Fill it right in. Okay. Now, when you do this, sometimes you have to kind of touch up a little bit. Just pull a few things out. And you can push some of the ground up into the base of the wall. Let's see if I can get a little bit more paint over here. Yeah, it gives this a little bit of an edge there. And pull that down. Let some of the pink or the red show through. And get that to the ground. Right along through here. There you go. Now I'll keep building that up until I get, maybe the texture that I'm looking for. I'm going to show that a little bit of cast shadow on there, right underneath that area. Just put a little bit more contrast on that edge. Have it show up a little bit more. Yeah. Okay, you're getting the idea how I'm kind of going about filling this in. If you keep painting, let's say if I keep pulling this, eventually I might do too much. So I have to be careful that I don't overdo it here too much. Okay. Now, the only other thing that makes this sharper is just let it dry. Let this dry out a bit. And then go back and outline it a little bit more. But what I've also got to do, I got to make the background around the building itself a little bit darker. So what I do is I come back in, and I'm just going to do some little bit of texturing around the building itself. And then what I'm going to do with that, I take this, what I've done here, and just pull this back. Just pull it back away from the roof. Just have it fade away in the background. But the more you get the darker the background around everything, the more the bond's going to jump out. That's what we're trying to have it do, jump out a little bit, okay? So that's the idea of that. That's how that works. And right down, the whole background's going to be filled in eventually. But see how the bond will jump out. The bond's going to jump out. So anyhow, I'm going to have to finish this a little bit, maybe at home, and I'm going to bring it back and I'll show it to you next time finish. But what I've got to do is rework around the shed so that that jumps out a little bit more. And once this other part's dry, then I'll indicate where the windows and the door and all that would go. So extra detail, okay? So it looks like I'm out of time, and so brush is up, and I'll see you next week or so, okay?